This video is brought to you by Captivating History. The beginning. Although she is known as one of the most important and memorable characters in history, Elizabeth I did not have a very promising beginning. Born to Henry VIII and his second wife, Anne Boleyn, Catholics considered Elizabeth I an illegitimate child, and they refused to recognize Henry VIII's divorce from his first wife, as he had done it against the wishes of the Pope. Elizabeth's birth was also a disappointment for her father, who, more than anything, desired a son he could call his heir. However, to the Protestants in England, Elizabeth was the sign of a new era, and they took the news of her birth as a celebration. With such a divided reaction to her birth, Elizabeth's future was uncertain. 2 years after Elizabeth's birth, her mother, Anne Boleyn, was executed. Elizabeth was removed from the line of succession, but she still enjoyed a pleasant upbringing. She was placed in Hatfield Palace with her half-brother Edward from her father's third marriage to Jane Seymour. Together, they were given access to some of the best education available at the time. For the remainder of her childhood, Elizabeth I had only a few close confidants. The first was her devoted governess, Cat Ashley, who made it her mission to ensure Elizabeth continued to receive an excellent education. The other major female influence in Elizabeth's life was her fifth stepmother, Catherine Howard, a young girl barely older than Elizabeth herself, who doted on her and showered her with gifts and affection. Sadly, Catherine was executed, just like Elizabeth's mother had been. By that time, Elizabeth had gotten a small taste of what royal life was truly like. A lady becomes a princess. Shortly after Catherine Howard's death, the king married, for the final time, an older woman named Catherine Parr. By then, Elizabeth was 10 and quite accustomed to welcoming new stepmothers into her life. Luckily, Catherine was another kind and important presence in her life. Catherine convinced the now aging Henry VIII to recognize Elizabeth once again as a princess, therefore renewing her as a person in the line of succession. This was a huge step forward for Elizabeth. The focus on her education intensified, and before the age of 13, she had the skills necessary to conduct herself in every realm of society. She spoke many languages, was an avid dancer, understood the rules of politics and court, and was an accomplished writer and embroiderer. In 1546, Elizabeth's father died, and his son, Edward, was named king. At this point, Elizabeth moved in with her stepmother and cousins to continue her rigorous education. Musical thrones. The next few years were tumultuous for the young princess. Soon after Edward gained the title of king, he fell ill with tuberculosis, dying shortly after. It was discovered that during his short reign, he had changed his will to name his cousin, Jane Grey, as queen, a role she reluctantly accepted at the urging of her power-hungry relatives. Her position as queen was short-lived, however, as Mary, Elizabeth's half-sister, soon came to claim her rightful place as queen, which was widely supported throughout the kingdom. Jane was ordered to death, and Mary set out on a mission to restore England to the Catholic Church. Elizabeth spent a year under house arrest at the order of her sister, as many Protestants across England were furious at the change in leadership. Elizabeth, being Protestant herself, was accused of encouraging the riots, but was eventually determined to be innocent. However, once released, she thought it best to keep a low profile. She returned to Hatfield, where she had spent much of her childhood. Queen Elizabeth I. Being a well-educated and wise young woman, Elizabeth spent the next several years trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. She dressed modestly and did her best to ignore the advances of men who only looked to engage her to build their own power. When her sister Mary died in 1558, Elizabeth was named queen, and she ascended to the throne a chaste, unmarried woman. Although it was expected that Elizabeth would choose a husband, she found no one that suited her. She mused about an alliance with another kingdom, and many suitors from Spain, Austria, and Sweden courted her. She also considered wedding her longtime friend Robert Dudley, but ultimately decided she wanted to have full control over her kingdom and didn't want to fall into the same power place that had plagued her father's wives and so many other monarchs that had come before her. Her first few years were tricky. While she was a gentler ruler than some before her, the fact that she was a Protestant queen made many of her subjects uncomfortable, and it made for some shaky relations with Catholic states. She needed to be smart if she wanted to maintain control, conflicts with Spain. From the moment Elizabeth I took the throne, there had been tension with Spain. It was a powerful Catholic country, and England, under the rule of Elizabeth, was Protestant. Also, Elizabeth had angered the Spanish Republic by refusing to consider a union through marriage, so conflict between the two states was destined. In 1577, Elizabeth began a sneaky and calculated attack on Spanish ships stationed in America by having her most trusted sailor, Francis Drake, methodically pillage the ships to strip them of all goods and valuables, bringing them back to his queen. Cleverly, she then had Drake knighted by a French duke so she could celebrate his piracy while making it look like France itself was celebrating the behavior. Spain was furious, and in the mid-1580s, Spain and England found themselves constantly engaged in conflicts at sea. One of the main reasons for battle was the major focus on gaining the support of the Netherlands, which was religiously divided between Catholic and Protestant areas. While Elizabeth didn't have the same military strength as the Spanish Armada, her country was a force to be reckoned with at sea, and they fought with cunning and strategy. Try as Spain might, they could never gain much ground in England, and the war dragged on for many years. Finally, after it became clear that Spain was not going to be able to conquer England while Elizabeth was queen, they entered peace talks. Elizabeth's reputation as a formidable leader was cemented in history. Arts and tea. Elizabeth I never stopped strengthening the English army, ensuring that their defenses would survive long past her death. She was in her mid-50s and directed some of her attention to more enjoyable aspects of life. Elizabeth was very fond of the theater, and she was a big fan of one playwright, the one and only William Shakespeare. Elizabeth adored his work, and while she would never dare to do something as common as attending the public playhouse, she did frequently have him and his troupe perform for her at court. She became so enchanted with the art form that she had her own acting troupe formed that was called Queen Elizabeth's Men. Queen Elizabeth's Men were hand-selected actors who performed whatever and wherever the Queen commanded. In the last few years of the Queen's life, she had her kingdom become more involved in international trade. The East India Company brought tea into England, and it was likely Elizabeth herself who had the first sip of the drink that has now become so closely associated with England. Elizabeth seemed to grow more comfortable as she aged. Gone were her days of modesty, and instead she was known for elaborate gowns she would only wear one time each. Having been a victim of smallpox in her youth, she was known for wearing a thick face of white makeup and a large orange wig of curls that together are the most recognizable features used in films and other artistic depictions of her. While there is no official confirmation of how or why she died, there is wide speculation that she was slowly poisoned by very white makeup, as it contained a high level of lead. Whatever the cause, Queen Elizabeth I died surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting on March 14, 1603, after 45 years of rule. Her body was carried through London by 4 gray horses dressed in black velvet, and she was laid to rest in a place of honor in Westminster Abbey, where she lies to this day. To learn more about Elizabeth I, then check out our book, Elizabeth I, A Captivating Guide to the Queen of England, who was the last of the 5 monarchs of the House of Tudor. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook for free while still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.